Welcome to another episode of Walchet Talks. Today we're looking at a topic that all corporate legal departments would be interested in: how to manage contracts, the Contract Lifecycle Management or CLM tools. And I think these fall into three very broad categories: pre-execution or before the contract is signed, the execution itself or the signing of the contract, post-execution or the obligation management once the contract has been signed. And we all know the CLM space is fairly crowded and there are so many tools out there, and some have some very cool bonus features. So we are very happy to have with us Lucy Bassli, the founder and principal at the InnoLaw group and an expert on CLM tools with us today. Hi, Lucy. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. We're super excited. I'm just going to give the audience a little bit more background about you. So Lucy is a lawyer and an author of two books: The Simple Guide to Legal Innovation, and the second, CLM Simplified, Efficient Contracting for Law Departments. Before founding the InnoLaw Group, she was the Assistant General Counsel of Legal Operations and Contracting at Microsoft. The InnoLaw Group is a boutique legal service provider that helps businesses modernize their legal function by empowering the teams to manage their contracts more efficiently. Now, this is really interesting because she's also a faculty member of Suffolk University Law School's Legal Innovation and Technology Certificate Program. It's great to have you with us today, Lucy.
Great to be here. Great to talk about my favorite subject. I'm excited to get started.
Let's jump right in. So I wanted to ask you at the outset a little bit more broadly, what exactly does a CLM system mean? What does it include? And since I have heard you talk on some of your other shows, I know it's not just technology, but sometimes it's also getting the right processes in place. But I was wondering if you could sort of break that down for us.
Absolutely. So the main thing I'm hearing today in the market that's confusing everybody, buyers and sellers are not helping. CLM is not a system. CLM is a complicated combination of people and processes and probably different systems all coming together in order to manage contracts, right? Contract Lifecycle Management is a series of processes. I think the rush to technology and the excitement right now around technology has kind of made CLM equal a system. But that's not actually true. It's kind of like saying, you need to do word processing or writing, and that equals Microsoft Word. Well, no, yeah. Microsoft Word is a technology that enables you to write faster or type clearer. But I think that's a little bit of what's happening here. We've seen it in other areas. I mean, when we say CRM, do you have a CRM? Well, customer relationship management, as we know, is also not just a system. But I really, really want to beat the drum on this because I think in this scenario, it becomes so easy to get excited about the technology that people forget all of the things they can do to improve their processes and improve their contracting experience before technology or in conjunction with technology. But there's so much legal departments can do that will make incremental
I actually really liked what you said before the technology, because I totally agree with that. I think there's so much, even if you choose to go ahead with the technology, there's so much that you need to do before that to prepare for that introduction of technology. So I really like that you brought that out.
Well, and our team does a lot to really, we push this concept of CLM readiness. It's not a thing. I'm trying to create it as a thing, or at least I keep, educating every prospective client I have, every client we work with, is you need to be ready for it. You have to do homework. There is pre-work to do for the purpose of automation. But again, even without automation, or even if you never get to automation, or your budget runs dry, or the system implementation fails, or the system provider, bails, or I don't know, gets bought out or gets shut down. I mean, there's just so much happening right now in the CLM technology space that you have to protect and prepare yourself for anything. And why not get ready in a way that says, you know what, even if this technology doesn't work, I'm already doing things better today than I was yesterday. There's already an improvement to the experience. So there's a lot that can be done. And I think that readiness gets overlooked, again, in the excitability right now around technology and the desire to buy magic buttons that will solve contracting problems, that people are kind of getting caught up in that, unfortunately, and then sadly are disappointed. Well, yeah, it's kind of a problem on both sides, the buyer and the sellers right now.
Yeah, and I think it's right to point out the equal amount of responsibility on both sides, because very often the buyers tend to feel, this is all the seller is going to take care of. I don't need to worry about that. And then when it doesn't work, the seller is the first to take the blame. But often they've not looked inside first to see what are the things that they need to put in place for the system to work.
Absolutely. It takes two to tango. I just was actually interviewed for a legal press article about, are sellers overselling? And I said, well, probably, sure. That's the job of a sales function.
Yeah.
They tend to oversell, doesn't matter what you're buying. But it takes two to tango. And you have to know what you're out there shopping for. You can't get upset. You can't blame, the grocery store because they sold you the wrong potato chips when you were really hungry for vegetables.
That's right? True. At some level, it's caveat emptor, right? Buyer beware.
Exactly.
So let's take a step back. From a company's perspective, if you're looking to get a CLM system in place, and when I say system, I'm not just talking about a tool, but it could even be the process like you talked about, but it has no clue where to start. I was wondering if you could elaborate on where a company should start when thinking about rolling out a CLM process.
Yes, absolutely. So as you say, in making sure we're using the same terminology, when you say system, you mean the holistic solution, right?
Yes.
System in the broadest sense, not a particular piece of technology. So first, let's make sure we're all aligned on that. So much is lost in taxonomy. I have a very easy answer. Any corporate law department that approaches us or approaches me with questions of where do I need a tool, where do I want to buy a tool, or I want to be more efficient, like you're saying, the broader question. My first question for them is, do you know why you're reviewing what you review? Do you know why the contracts that are landing in your inbox, you are doing them? Are those the right contracts? So we really start at a very higher philosophical level of, does the law department have a very clear policy around what the legal department should be touching? I don't even want to use the word review. What contracts should they be involved in at all? And which contracts they don't need to be involved in, which is very, very difficult question for a lot of in-house lawyers to ask themselves, wow, can I not look
actually say no to some contracts?
Can I say no? I always tell them it's like you're driving down a highway really, really fast because the contracts keep coming like crazy. And to the side, you're going to see a bunch of cars that are broken down or pulled over by a policeman or been in a terrible car accident. Well, shouldn't you behave differently depending on which one of those it is? But we don't, right? In the legal team, we just get contracts that come to our email probably, and we do them because they come to us. That's not the right way to approach our day job. So that's the first place to start. Legal review policy. Every law department needs to have a policy around their contract or contract review or contract policy. I don't care what you call it. Have a clear, very crisply written short statement about what the law department needs to be involved in and which contracts the law department doesn't need to be involved in.
I guess that really helps narrow the focus, right?
Absolutely. You can't do everything. You cannot do everything. When you come in-house, here's the secret nobody wants to talk about. You think you're doing everything because you're doing everything that comes to you, but you're not seeing the contracts that maybe you need to see because you haven't proactively and affirmatively explained to the company whom you're there to support. You're a part of the company. What it is that they should be coming to you with. So they come to you, you do whatever they give you, but that is not actually the proactive, substantive, high-quality level of legal support that they need. They don't know what they need. So either they're coming to you out of fear, out of confusion, or they're avoiding you completely because they just want to get things done quickly. Whatever the reason is, right or wrong, good or bad, sneaky or not sneaky, people need to know what the rules are. So that's the first step. You have to set the rules of engagement between legal and the rest of the company when it comes to contracts.
That's a great point. In one of your webinars, I heard you mention that the CLM system itself as a process is very broad and covers so many different aspects of the CLM, the contract lifecycle. And often you're not going to find one single tool that performs all of these functions like super efficiently. So I guess my question is, how does a customer choose which process they want to focus on and which process they want to integrate into?
Yes, absolutely. That's such an important question. So everything comes down to what's the biggest pain point on balance with what's going to be the ease of change management. Those two have to intersect at the right place, and that's how you know that's the place to start. Systems do not do everything well. They don't. Even, so when I say systems, I mean the technology. Right? CLM technology, while most of them claim to be end-to-end solutions, end-to-end systems, they can do everything well. I just posted about this, actually. I have 3 buckets. I just put on LinkedIn this visual of 3 buckets where I think CLM systems tend to fall in their strength. They do all of it, they claim to, but they tend to fall in 3 different areas, I think. And the technology is quite different in those, which is why I like to break them down this way, because the engineering required for it, the development, software development, is a little bit different. On the first, let's say on the one side, you have contract creation or template formation, right, where you're bringing in clauses and piecing together a document, and that document is then ready to kick off the contracting life cycle. That is a very different set of technology than workflow. Right? Workflow, routing, assigning, moving documents based on rules, routing them to other people, tracking how long it sits where, who's got it, getting inputs from other different parts of the company. Workflow is a different type of technology. And then finally, there's the repository. I'm going to call it a smart repository because today everything should be a smart repository, but an easily searchable repository with some basic data extraction. I'm going to say basic data extraction. Yeah. Those are 3 quite different technology development kind of, focus areas, but they are all needed to create an end-to-end. So not every system is good at all 3, and they're developing in some area. In some area, they're really strong, and they started in one of those 3, and then they need to expand into the others because the clients want that, the customers. But very few kind of start with being very good at all 3. Now, that's the technology. From the customer perspective, first of all, realizing that they're not all strong at everything is important. That's a fact. That is a fact. Go into it that every end-to-end solution is actually really strong at probably just one of those. Once you know that, that will help when you're assessing the technologies. But before you assess them, you have to know what your problem is that you're trying to solve. What is that number one problem? That is how law departments have to approach systems. Or technologies, right? They have to know what they're trying to solve first. Once they figure out the top pain point, they should do a pretty good check, a gut check. How hard is it going to be to change that? How hard is it going to be for me to change the behaviors of people across the company, potentially, not just the law department, in order to make that pain go away?
That's also a very important point you brought out. It's not just the law department. It's everybody in the company that touches that contract.
Absolutely. Unless what you're trying to solve is just template creation for the lawyers to be faster. Correct. That's okay. If that's your biggest pain point, that lawyers are spending too much time figuring out where to start, the department's growing like crazy, the lawyers are all over the place, recreating templates all the time, great. That could be an area to start. Then your change management is more narrow. It's focused on just the legal department, right? You have people under your control. If you're the general counsel, that may be a perfectly good place to start. But you have to know. You have to know what you're trying to tackle before you go out shopping for technology.
Because once you go shopping, you're going to get really confused because there are so many vendors out there.
It's all so exciting. It's like being hungry for French fries and going into a buffet. And then you're like, steak and dessert before you get to the French fries. You're like, wait, I just wanted French fries. By the way, they're cheaper. If you just buy French fries, they are cheaper than if you buy a buffet that has steak and lobster. So people need to step back and take a minute.
And also, unlike a buffet, you can't sample everything. You have to finally, because implementing and rolling out a CLM system takes a lot of time and effort apart from the cost. So you really need to be able to pick and choose the right one for you.
That's right. And besides the cost, there's also your reputation internally. Nothing will ruin a reputation faster than a failed technology implementation. People will remember that for years. And they'll be burned and they just won't be supportive if you're going to try to do it again. So you have to go in steady plan. You have to have a plan, a phased in approach, I would say for sure.
Got it. Makes sense. So I'm going to move on to sort of the next step of actually selecting a CLM vendor. So what are the considerations you think a client should keep in mind when selecting a vendor?
First and foremost, write down those priorities and those requirements. Write them down. Make sure that you have all the right stakeholders who have contributed to that list. And you need to have a set of system requirements, of solution, technology requirements, not from a really deep technical perspective, but even the idea of integrations. You need to integrate with other systems. You need to have that written down, and it needs to be prioritized. So rule number one, you have to have your requirements written in a way that is conducive to a technology project manager taking it and then being able to translate that into features, technology features and functionality. So first, requirements, get the right stakeholders, and then make sure once you have your long list, which I call your wish list, you then prioritize. And it's hard. It is hard to say there's something less important than the next thing because everything is important, but you have to. So a prioritized list of requirements is number one. Once you have that, then you are simultaneously probably doing some research in the market generally. Maybe you're looking at a Gartner report. Maybe you are just watching your inbox because there's a bunch of stuff coming at you about CLM. Maybe you went to a conference or a webinar. You have some idea in mind about some systems. That's great, but go broader. See if there's others that you might have missed. And this is just before you even really talk to them. This is just finding out what's out there available already without providing your email address so nobody's contacting you yet. And get that really big list in your head. From that big list, you are going to down select into a handful that you're going to want to reach out to. At the point that you reach out to them, be very crisp on the fact that you don't want a generic demo. Do not get a generic demo. Generic demos are always going to look good. They better. If a generic demo doesn't look good, run.
That's what they're designed for, right?
That's what they're designed for. It all works techno-magically. It really looks like techno-magic. That's not what you want. You want a very focused demo for your prioritized pain points that are in your requirements list. You want to see how that works specifically. So then you have to arrange your demos. Make sure the demos are catered to you. Only after that are you ready to start considering, do you want to do a pilot program? Can it be a free pilot program? Can it be some very, very, very inexpensive pilot program? And start to see if you can get some hands-on capability to test and learn if the system works for you. That's often an overlooked step, that demo, the pilot. Pilot is often overlooked. I really do recommend it. Especially if you are changing from a different system, especially if you're a large, complex global organization, especially if you're trying to influence across the enterprise. If it's just the first time in your small company, 2-person, 3-person legal department, you might be able to jump a little quicker, but I would be a little bit more careful in other scenarios. And then you have to pick. And there is no guarantee that you'll pick the right one. But I can guarantee you that you're not going to pick something completely terrible. The worst thing that might happen is it's going to be a misalignment of what they're good at and what the customer actually needs. That's that loss in translation that sometimes happens.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I think sometimes the provider also needs to be clear about how much they can customize and how much is just off the shelf that the client needs to accept.
Yeah, and stay away from customizations. Do not try to get anything that needs customization. That requires a ton of tech resources. And after it's live, ongoing tech resources, much more than whatever you can get off the shelf. So again, reduce the requirements to the lowest common denominator, what will help solve a pain point and minimal change. I don't ever recommend customized CLM systems and technologies.
That's
not for anybody just starting out. They've got to start with what's off the shelf.
Even if it's just a customized workflow, you
don't need a CLM system for a customized workflow. I would use Power Apps and Office 365.
That's true.
You really don't. I mean, you shouldn't need a customized CLM end-to-end system. That's what becomes, it's complex enough without customizations. Once you're in a customization, you are tied into that technology. It is very hard to break free. It is very hard to shift internally. It becomes a loveless marriage very, very quickly.
And I also find that sometimes when you've gone in for a lot of customization and you've integrated with an off-the-shelf product, and every time that off-the-shelf product has an update, then all the customizations break and you need to get tech resources to come in.
Absolutely. It's hard enough with off-the-shelf solutions on their own when they have an update and suddenly you're like, wait a minute, did they just push an update? Why is this not working? What changed? Once you have customized integrations, you just don't need it. You don't. Very few companies or legal departments are sophisticated enough to handle a customized solution in the long run. They just aren't. And that's not their day job. They shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't need a whole IT team sitting in legal just to help manage a customized contract management system.
That's an excellent point, Lucy. I love that point. I'm going to move to another pain point, which is essentially migration, because nobody gets a CLM system or a tool, from ground zero. They typically get one when they're already, on the road and running, and they need a system to manage the scale of the contracts they already have in place. So how does one handle the painful process of migration?
Well, there's kind of two. I'll put it on a scale. Three paths probably along the spectrum. One, don't migrate anything. You just start going forward. Anything before a certain date continues to live wherever it was. And wherever it was, we know. C drives and laptops and desktops, Google Drives, OneDrives, Dropbox, Box, and everything else. Oh, and filed share, server, all that world.
Yeah.
Everybody has that experience, and that is a reality. So you can just say, starting this date, going forward, it's here. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is we want to gather every signed, finalized contract across the company. I don't care where they're stored. I don't care who has them. And I want them all moved into the new system. That's hard. Whenever I hear the word all or every, I'm going to question if that's even possible in reality. Is it even possible? Never mind practical. It is not practical. So that's two. Yeah. Depends on the size of the company, of course, on the culture, on the complexity. Of course, there's always those dependencies. And then there's something in the middle where you do some hybrid and you say, you know what? For these type of contracts, all my revenue contracts, I do want to find those. I'm really worried about those. So I want to get all of the revenue contracts into the new system, but everything else, that's okay. We'll let it live where it is. So that hybrid tends to be the more comfortable, logical place to land for most of the clients we work with. Yeah. And then it requires its own effort. That is a standalone project because it's not on fire to get it in on day one into a system that's going live. Now, I will say, if the dream is that you are using those existing live contracts and you want to have every amendment or change related to those contracts, in the system on day one, you're going to have to do a little bit more homework to match the timing of the migration to the launch. But I think, again, people tend to overcomplicate it because it sounds so good. It does. It sounds great. And in theory, of course, that's what you want. But the realities of doing it are super complex. And the devil's in the detail. There's a reason that phrase exists. It is.
And I think it becomes a little bit more complicated when you have agreements which have been executed with physical wet signatures, and going forward you're using e-signatures. So it's so much easier to extract clean data out of the documents that have been e-signed as opposed to the ones with wet signatures, even if you have an OCR capability built in.
I didn't even go down the path of, on that scale, maybe just picking your digital contracts is one way and saying whatever you've physically have scanned and stored somewhere, I wouldn't even call those digital contracts. I mean, OCR technology is pretty good, but oh my God, that's another whole aspect of, again, when we think about migration, like you're saying, it's a separate project. It's a standalone project for sure.
That's a good way to think about it. I like that let's go with all the digital contracts first. I think that's a much easier place to start.
Why not? You can slice this any way you want, any way that works for your company. There is no one right answer. And every client I deal with, every law department I work with, they have a different feel. They have a different cultural vibe. What's important, what isn't, who's sensitive, who isn't, whose change management is going to be more difficult than the other. I mean, there's so much of this that's about the human change management aspect of it, that all of these decisions are eventually going to be impacted by the people. Yeah. People and process. That's what makes or breaks good system implementations. People and process.
Actually, that you brought me to my next question, where was actually talking about something that I wanted to talk about something that you previously brought up, where it's not just the legal team, it's the business teams, the operational teams, could be the finance teams, basically any other department, all departments that will need to touch that contract. So adoption, how do you manage adoption? Because adoption is a universal challenge everywhere. And especially when you're dealing with different stakeholders across the board, how do you manage and bring that whole process together?
Yeah. It's hard. You need to make sure before you jump into this kind of a project that you have the right executive level leadership. So I'm going to start top down, really. Before you start thinking about spreading across, the company, a new process, new system, you really need to make sure that you have the executive level buy-in and real support. It can't be passive buy-in. It can't be, oh, sure, I support that, and then they're quietly still doing their own thing. So getting executive support is critical. Communicating change early and often, over and over and over again, is critical, right? I mean, this is a change management exercise. There's a reason they're change management professionals. And I did that actually when I was in-house. I brought in a change management consultant, not a CLM system implementation consultant as much, right? I really needed them to help me think through how am I going to possibly communicate this to a company of 100,000 people around, 100 subsidiaries, whatever our number was back then.
Yeah.
So adoption, you can't guarantee adoption, right? That's on the side of the adopter, the person, the user. But you can work on the change management, right? You can push information, you can push content, push materials, push training, do it in different vehicles, different methods. Not everybody wants a video training session, right? Not everybody wants to be attending a session in person or live. However, it has to be in a lot of different ways. One-page documents, click-through experiences. So you have to push often and early communication, push often and early the training. But at the end of the day, there has to be a what's in it for them. Why would I change? Why? One is force. Some companies do that. Top down. Hey, from now on, we're going to do things this way. That's okay. It's not a bad thing, right? We're all grown-ups. You're doing everything the way you want. It doesn't always work inside a company. So that's okay. I do see a lot of leaders shying away from that. But we have to have some rules if we want control. So that's one angle of it, right? That's the carrot and the stick. That's the stick, of course. But then there's the carrot. What's in it for them? You'll be able to, be more efficient, be more effective. You'll be able to track better. You'll be able to have data and reportability. All of that is great. You'll be able to get your business done faster. That's really the number one benefit to the business. So that all has to be part of the communication plan and that change management effort for sure. But you can't guarantee it. And you know what? People have very little tolerance for bad experience with technology. Very little. Once you break that trust, it's not like humans where you can say, oh, come on, give me another try, please. Nope. Once they don't like it, they're not going to try it again. So the system has got to be easy to use. And that's why I always say, make sure you go for the lowest common denominator. Implement the easiest parts. Get wins along the way. Phase in, right, the implementation. That's your best hope for adoption, not boom. Oh, and it's complex and there's these 20 different steps and everything is new. That's just hard to, why?
I think my personal opinion on this is that I think retail apps have really set the expectations really high. So when you get so used to using Uber or Netflix and it's so seamless and it's so easy and they're always trying to make the experience better for the user, when suddenly you hit a SaaS application which requires training and it requires you to spend some time learning how to use the SaaS application, you're suddenly like, oh my God, this is not like my Uber. This is not like Netflix. It's too complicated. I don't want to spend time learning it. That's the first response.
Well, and I love to use Uber as an example because I always use it as an analogy where even with Uber, that's so easy. You know what you need to know? You need to know, do you need an Uber X or do you need an XL? You need to know, planning ahead. They have a plan ahead now or not. You need to know, what does it mean when I say ride share? I'll wait a little longer. I'll walk a little further, but it'll be a little cheaper. Those are all my requirements. I need to know what I want. When I first download that app and use it the first time, even that requires like, oh, okay, I have this now. You're not going to do it at the airport when you're exhausted and want to get home and hungry and it's the middle of the night. That's not the first time you're going to download the Uber app because okay, I might have a learning curve. But for some reason, we forget that. And that learning curve, when it comes to these, system implementations, the big ones, I'm like, oh, it's going to go live. The system should. I had a client tell me this over and over. Well, the system should. And but once they use the system, once they get in the system, it should. Are you kidding? Do you remember the first time you saw an Uber app? It takes a couple of times, right? a couple of tries, and then you become good. And then at 3 a.m. in an airport in a different country, you're like, okay, I'm good. By the way, did you check that they have Uber in that country? But there is some readiness, even with the most wonderful, user experience. So imagine when you're trying to change how lawyers do their day job and how they touch contracts, and you think that the system is just gonna do something. No. That to me is just a misconception that is hard. It's hard for me to be the boring. We always say we rain on parades. We're like a little cloud. There's a big parade, and we're like, actually, let me tell you, you're gonna need an umbrella and raincoat.
That actually concludes our episode for today. Thanks so much, Lucy. It's been extremely insightful, and we've all learned a lot about CLM tools and how to approach the entire process in general. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's a very complicated space. I'm always happy to have an opportunity to just kind of share some best practices. But I wish everybody luck in their contracting journeys. And I'm always happy to connect and have people reach out to me on LinkedIn. Helpful anytime.
Sure. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.